The sounds of those seeking sanctuary vary. Some are loud, like the hunchback of Notre Dame, as he swooped down the rope from that Gothic Catholic church in Paris. When Charles Lawton, in the title role, sees Maureen O'Hara as Esmeralda is about to be hung for being a witch, he swings over and rescues her from the executioner. He takes her back to the church balcony, screaming, "Sanctuary! Sanctuary! Sanctuary!" And the crowd goes wild. The sounds of sanctuary can also be very quiet, like the whispers of stocking feet going up a wooden staircase to where Anne Frank and her family lived. In 1989, on my way to Kenya, I stopped in Amsterdam to take in the sights, and in taking that infamous tour, I walked behind the bookcase, up those narrow steps. I remember not saying a word, looking behind me all the way, feeling the potential steps of a Nazi soldier. While in those tiny rooms, I imagined the silence that would be required of me to live in this sanctuary. I remember my great-grandfather talking about how his uncle had emancipated himself one night from the brutalities of enslavement. Somehow, he just slipped away in the middle of the night, seeking sanctuary in a nearby swamp, breathing through the reed of a straw, sucking oxygen bubbles as he sought sanctuary in anaerobic bacteria. Things have got to be really bad for someone to seek sanctuary. To leave your home, to find refuge in another place. Imagine having to pull up all of your roots and relationships that you've known forever and to leave them behind. How could you do that? How? Because people seeking sanctuary, I believe, they believe that they are worthwhile of something better than the horror that is facing them or the horror that's coming after them. It could be crop failure, perpetual unemployment, untreatable diseases, state violence, or poor preying upon the poor. Whatever the reason, the need to protect oneself and one's loved ones is probably the greatest example of human affirmation we can ever witness. And even greater human assertion in that process is the belief that there could be something better. The Franks in Amsterdam knew that there had to be something better than the systematic and scientific extermination of the Jews. My great-grandfather's uncle knew that there had to be something better while he was sucking on that air from the straw of the reed than being treated like an animal every single day. Those migrants, those dear migrants walking from Central America know that there must be some place better, a place for their children to be safe from continued, unrelenting, purposeful destabilization of their countries. You see, there's something special about these people seeking sanctuary because everybody doesn't leave. Everybody doesn't leave. The group walking right now to freedom is a tiny fraction of people in Central America. There are over 20 million people in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Everybody didn't leave the plantations of enslavement. And some Jews thought the Nazi phase would pass by, and they stayed put. What is it about these people? What makes them seek sanctuary? Now, I believe that they are set apart by two things. First, they are set apart because they are self-motivated by their own moral imagination. They believe that their inherent worth and dignity is non-negotiable. Their lives and the lives of those they care for are worth taking unimaginable risks for. Moral imagination means to envision a full range of possibilities in a particular situation in order to solve an ethical challenge. Think about it. The social structures have been designed to fail those seeking sanctuary. They failed the German Jews and then the American Jews. They failed enslaved Africans and then free blacks. And they have failed the Compañeros of Central America and the DACA kids of Los Angeles. But they still imagine righteousness, equity, and fairness. Now, freedom has always been precarious for black and brown people who stood on the legal margins of society. Blackness and enslavement were so firmly connected in antebellum America that to be free and black and to exist is a civic anomaly. To be free and black is a civic anomaly. It takes moral imagination against all odds to survive perpetual systems of dehumanization. Sanctuary seekers have self-empathy and the awareness to discern what is morally relevant in the given situation. The very act of seeking sanctuary is the spark that ignites this flame of moral imagination. A moral imagination to envision a new and creative alternative. Think about it. People daydreaming behind bookcases in swamps and on dusty roads walking to America, saying to themselves, I can see myself as a free person. I can see myself safe. I can see myself worshiping my chosen faith. I can see my children grow up. People seeking sanctuary also have the moral courage to see themselves as human beings and persons, not objects whose value rests in utility or usefulness. In many ways, seeking sanctuary is a process. It's a process by which an individual creates metaphors from images recorded in the senses of basic humanity. They're deep within us. It's in our DNA to be free and safe. These senses are stored in memory, which are then surfaced so that that person who is suffering can bring forth moral correspondences in their lived experiences. Now, this requires them having an intuitive belief that truth can be found in chaos, and there is hope for the proper ordering of the soul. Now, I believe that in addition to moral imagination, these people seeking sanctuary are set apart by a sense also of generativity. And this was a term coined by Erik Erikson back in, 1950. And it was to denote then a concern for establishing and guiding the next generation. And it does describe a need to nurture and guide. People seeking sanctuary want to first have their children and their community survive. Number one. And they want to provide them with safe harbor and teach the next generation their stories and their beliefs and their accomplishments. They want to show their children that their continued existence matters. Now, one of the greatest movements in generativity for black people in America was the period called Reconstruction after the Civil War. Now, the first thing that quasi-free black people did was go searching for relatives, to go searching for their children who have been sold over here and for their parents that have been sold over there and their partners, and they just went looking for people. That was the first thing that quasi-free black people did, is go find their people. And while they did find them, they also banded together with other families and strangers along the road and made new family along roadsides and in swamps and in burnt-out plantations, seeking refuge as a landless people with no rights. But very quickly, within 50 years, all over this country, these bands of illiterate, homeless people built black towns throughout the South and the West as they sought sanctuary from the brutality of America. Following World War I and during the oil boom of 1910, the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma was one of those towns. Recognized nationally for its affluent African-American community, this thriving business district and its surrounding residential area was referred to as Black Wall Street. In fact, the district was so successful that $1 would stay within the district an estimated 19 months before being spent elsewhere. Not only did black Americans want to contribute to the success of their own shops, but they were also forced to because of racial segregation laws that prevented them from shopping anywhere else. They ran oil wells, they built civic organizations, churches, and political structures, and they generated a kind of generativity of a people without sanctioned universal franchise into the American system. Now, Greenwood may have been a haven for African Americans, but the state of Oklahoma, another thing. The state of Oklahoma has strict laws limiting the rights of black people in schools and hospitals, you know the story, restaurants, even public phone booths, believe it or not, were segregated. And miscegenation was a felony, lynchings were rampant, and by 1920 the Klan had made a huge resurgence in the state. Now, despite, the words until and despite, I actually noticed go with a lot of black stories, and yet. Despite, yet, and until. I'm going to use that a few times today. So despite all of this, they had the moral imagination to see themselves as worthy of dignity and stature, to thrive in this sanctuary that they built from nothing, until May 31st, 1921. 6-year-old Olivia Hooker was home with her family when a group of white men came through the backyard carrying torches. Her mother quickly hid Olivia and her 3 siblings under the dining room table and covered it up with a tablecloth, hoping they wouldn't make a sound. The men entered the door and began to destroy anything they could find of value. They broke her father's record player and they took an axe to her sister Irene's piano before moving on to other homes and businesses in the community. The New York Times at the time reported fires had been started by hundreds of white invaders soon after 1 o'clock, and other fires were set from time to time. By 8 o'clock, practically the entire 30 blocks of homes in the Negro quarters were in flames, and few buildings escaped destruction. Negroes caught in their burning homes and businesses were in many instances shot down as they attempted to escape. Hundreds of black people murdered and 6,000 arrested for creating their own sanctuary town. No sanctuary for Greenwood, or Rosewood, Florida, or Bridgeton, New Jersey, or the Colored Children's Home of New York City burnt to the ground in 1923. No sanctuary. But Olivia Hooker, that little 6-year-old girl hiding underneath the table, she survived. And she went on to demonstrate the moral imagination and generativity found in those who live without sanctuary. In 1945, Olivia Hooker became the first African-American woman to join the U.S. Coast Guard. She went on to earn a doctorate degree in psychology and helped form the Tulsa Race Riot Commission in 1997 to investigate the massacre and make a case to the state for reparations. Dr. Hooker is 103 years old this past week. And she's thought to be the last surviving witness to the Tulsa race riots. In Dr. Hooker's testimony, she talked about the joy of her home in Greenwood before the invasion. Like so many, she knew that being in a sanctuary like that town meant that you are always in a constant state of vigilance. Always looking both ways, looking behind your back, worried about being caught, found out, threatened, or even wiped out. The liminal nature of sanctuary space makes sanctuaries for most people very temporary. Sanctuaries are temporary. A sanctuary, but for how long? Friends, I have to share something, and I do so with an open heart today, and I hope you remain open as well as I share this. You have heard me say from this pulpit before, and you've heard me say it authentically, how much I enjoy the idea of America and its unique historical constellations. Yet,
There we go.
I hold these democratic aspirations in complete and continued tension because we, the children of enslaved Africans, we, the foundational human engine that created American wealth, we, the people of a darker hue, have no safe space. Friends, know that I have never, which is why I have struggled writing this sermon, I have never, ever experienced a feeling of complete sanctuary, ever. I believe the perilous, insidious, day-to-day realities of being black in America has altered, I really believe this, I think it's altered our brain chemistry to the point that we have been recalibrated to be immune from the fanciful vision that we could ever have sanctuary in America. I really believe that. As a result, I do not yearn for that impossible day where I can rest my burden and my ancestors' burdens down, and I don't hope for it because 400 years of fantasies, 400 years of fantasies place serious limitations on my sanity. Yet, there is a gift. There is a gift in all of this. Because of this